Section 32 of Reviews by Oscar Wilde. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by John Rose. Reviews by Oscar Wilde, edited by Robert Ross. Section 32, New Novels. Pall Mall Gazette, October 28, 1886. Astray, A Tale of a Country Town, is a very serious volume. It has taken 4 people to write it, and even to read it requires assistance. Its dullness is premeditated and deliberate, and comes from a laudable desire to rescue fiction from flippancy. It is, in fact, tedious from the noblest motives and wearisome through its good intentions. Yet the story itself is not an uninteresting one. Quite the contrary. It deals with the attempt of a young doctor to build up a noble manhood on the ruins of a wasted youth. Burton King, while little more than a reckless lad, forges the name of a dying man, is arrested and sent to penal servitude for 7 years. On his discharge, he comes to live with his sisters in a little country town, and finds that his real punishment begins when he is free, for prison has made him a pariah. Still, through the nobility and self-sacrifice of his life, he gradually wins himself a position, and ultimately marries the prettiest girl in the book. His character is, on the whole, well drawn, and the authors have almost succeeded in making him good without making him priggish. The method, however, by which the story is told is extremely tiresome. It consists of an interminable series of long letters by different people and of extracts from various diaries. The book, consequently, is piecemeal and unsatisfactory. It fails in producing any unity of effect. It contains the rough material for a story, but is not a completed work of art. It is, in fact, more of a notebook than a novel. We fear that too many collaborators are like too many cooks and spoil the dinner. Still, in this tale of a country town, there are certain solid qualities, and it is a book that one can, with perfect safety, recommend to other people. Miss Rhoda Broughton belongs to a very different school. No one can ever say of her that she has tried to separate flippancy from fiction, and whatever harsh criticisms may be passed on the construction of her sentences, she, at least, possesses that one touch of vulgarity that makes the whole world kin. We are sorry, however, to see from a perusal of Betty's Visions that Miss Broughton has been attending the meetings of the Psychical Society in search of copy. Mysticism is not her mission, and telepathy should be left to Messrs. Myers and Gurney. In Philistia lies Miss Broughton's true sphere, and to Philistia she should return. She knows more about the vanities of this world than about this world's visions, and a possible garrison town is better than an impossible ghostland. That other person, who gives Mrs. Alfred Hunt the title for her 3-volume novel, is a young girl by name Hester Langdale, who, for the sake of Mr. Godfrey Daylesford, sacrifices everything a woman can sacrifice, and on his marrying someone else becomes a hospital nurse. The hospital nurse idea is perhaps used by novelists a little too often in cases of this kind. Still, it has an artistic as well as an ethical value. The interest of the story centers, however, in Mr. Daylesford, who marries not for love but for ambition, and is rather severely punished for doing so. Mrs. Daylesford has a sister called Polly, who develops, according to the approved psychological method, from a hobbledehoy girl into a tender, sweet woman. Polly is delightfully drawn, but the most attractive character in the book, strangely enough, is Mr. Godfrey Daylesford. He is weak, but he is very charming. So charming, indeed, is he, that it is only when one closes the book that one thinks of censuring him. While we are in direct contact with him, we are fascinated. Such a character has, at any rate, the morality of truth about it. Here literature has faithfully followed life. Mrs. Hunt writes a very pleasing style, bright and free from affectation. Indeed, everything in her work is clever except the title. A Child of the Revolution is by the accomplished authoress of the Atelier du Lys. The scene opens in France in 1793, and the plot is extremely ingenious. The wife of Jacques Vaud, a Lyons deputy, loses by illness her baby girl while her husband is absent in Paris, where he has gone to see Danton. At the instigation of an old priest, she adopts a child of the same age, a little orphan of noble birth, whose parents have died in the Reign of Terror, and passes it off as her own. Her husband, a stern and ardent republican, worships the child with a passion like that of Jean Valjean for Cosette. Nor is it till she has grown to perfect womanhood that he discovers that he has given his love to the daughter of his enemy. This is a noble story, but the workmanship, though good of its kind, is hardly adequate to the idea. The style lacks grace, movement, and variety. It is correct, but monotonous. Seriousness, like property, has its duties as well as its rights, and the first duty of a novel is to please. A Child of the Revolution hardly does that. Still, it has merits. Aphrodite is a romance of ancient Hellas. The supposed date, as given in the first line of Miss Safford's admirable translation, is 551 B.C. This, however, is probably a misprint. At least, we cannot believe that so careful an archaeologist as Ernst Eckstein would talk of a famous school of sculpture existing at Athens in the 6th century, and the whole character of the civilization is of a much later date. The book may be described as a new setting of the tale of Aconteus and Cydippe, and though Eckstein is a sort of literary Tadema and cares more for his backgrounds than he does for his figures, still he can tell a story very well, and his hero is made of flesh and blood. As regards the style, the Germans have not the same feeling as we have about technicalities in literature. To our ears, words such as Phareion, Sikos, Oionistis, Cyrides, and the like sound harshly in a novel, and give an air of pedantry, not of picturesqueness. Yet, in its tone, Aphrodite reminds us of the late Greek novels. Indeed, it might be one of the lost tales of Miletus. It deserves to have many readers and a better binding. 1. Astray, A Tale of a Country Town, by Charlotte M. Young, Mary Bramston, Christabel Coleridge, and Esme Stewart. Hatchards. 2. Betty's Visions, by Rhoda Broughton. Routledge and Sons. 3. That Other Person, by Mrs. Alfred Hunt. Chatto and Windus. 4. A Child of the Revolution, by the author of Mademoiselle Mori. Hatchards. 5. Aphrodite, translated from the German of Ernst Eckstein, by Mary J. Safford. New York, William and Gutzberger. London, Trubner and Company. End of section 32. New Novels.